So today I want to talk about something that's very, very close to my heart. And many of the times when I talk to my CEO friends, we sometimes agree, but most of the time we don't. And this is what we always saying. I'm always telling them that I don't think organizations are having a funding problem. I always feel like most of the time the issue is around the structure. And I'm always insisting that until that structure is fixed, no amount of fundraising strategy, donor dinners, or even beautifully written proposals will save them. And so I've spent nearly 2 decades in nonprofit financial leadership, and I've seen organizations with very powerful missions collapse under the weight of weak financial architecture. And that's why I like talking about how we should intentionally put our financial architecture together. And I've seen others that are quietly and strategically outlast funding droughts, policy shifts, and even global crises. We can remember about 5 years ago, the COVID-19. There are organizations that actually navigated that crisis and came out even more stronger. While, on the other hand, the organizations that fell with that crisis. And we cannot even speak enough about the just recently ended USID grant, how that has affected organizations. So, what can you say is the difference? From my own reflection, I surely know that it's not the passion, it's not the branding, and it's not even the size. I still say it must be the structure. So today, I want to break down how sustainable nonprofits structure their finances, not the textbook version, but the real behind the scenes architecture that funders trust and also organizations survive on. And stay with me because towards the end of this video, I want to share with you one structural mistake that makes even successful nonprofits dangerously fragile. So let's get in. So when people say that financial sustainability, most at the instant, they quickly think about diversified funding, increased fundraising, or even building reserves, which is, yes, those are true, but they are incomplete. Financial sustainability is not about how much money you can raise as an organization. It's about how this money that you have raised is structured within the organization. So think about it like a house, like maybe how you build a house. You can have a house, you have beautiful furniture in it. You can also buy very expensive decor, but if the foundation of your house is cracked, the building collapses. So sustainable profits, on the other hand, they just don't chase revenue, but they design financial systems that create resilience. And that design can show up in 5 key ways that I would like to share with you today. So, the first instance of how it shows is that these organizations they separate mission from machinery. So, this is a structural shift because what these non-profits do is that they look at their program cost and they are able to separate that from organizational infrastructure cost because most struggling organizations you find that they kind of blur these things together, so everything is coded to programs, and also everything they insist that everything must be direct, and overhead is actually minimized almost like it doesn't matter. But if you look at sustainable organizations, they understand something powerful, that infrastructure is actually not a burden, it is an asset. So their finance function, their systems, their compliance, and their leadership team, all this infrastructure, it is actually your asset that you must pay attention to when you think of resource allocation and also your sustainability infrastructure. So this is the machinery that actually protects your mission. So, for example, when I stepped in one organization years ago, they had 87% of their budget coded directly to programs. It looked impressive on paper, but in reality, the finance team was drowning. Because why? controls were weak, reporting was always flagged, and that burnouts were everywhere. So what did we do? We restructured our financial systems. We restructured our chart of accounts, how it speaks. We properly allocated support costs, and we strengthened indirect cost recovery. And believe me, in 18 months, audit findings dropped, reporting improved, and even funders increased confidence, because structure, without even saying it, builds credibility. The second thing that these organizations do is that they design for cash flow and not just for budgets. So here's something that most nonprofits don't talk about publicly. You can have a balanced budget and you can also still go bankrupt, because sustainability is about cash flow timing. Grants, are reimbursable, most of them. Donors have their payment cycle, and sometimes they can be late. And sometimes we have pledges that stretch across the quarters or even across financial years. Meanwhile, on the flip side, payroll has to run monthly. Vendors want payments, and definitely your programs are not pausing. So we know that sustainable nonprofits must structure their finance around liquidity strategy. They build operational reserves intentionally and not accidentally. They negotiate payment terms strategically, and also they maintain accessible facilities before they need them for those who are able to. And most importantly, they monitor their 6 to 9 month rolling cash forecast. And it's not an annual thing, it's a monthly thing that they have to do and incorporate in how they do their business. Because this is what I call moving from budget thinking to treasury thinking. So if your finance meetings only review budgets versus actuals, of course you are driving, but you are looking at the rear mirror of the window. Like you're not looking ahead, you are looking at what's happening behind. But we know that sustainable organizations, they actually drive looking forward. You must be able to see through the windshield of your vehicle. Then the third shift is that they fund infrastructure on purpose. So this normally sometimes is the elephant in the room, and it sometimes can come as the overhead myth. But many nonprofits, they still operate in this kind of fear. But sustainable organizations, they do something bold. They build infrastructure into proposals confidently. They educate funders, they articulate the real costs of building the infrastructure, and they price programs accurately. They don't apologize for putting what they are putting, because they understand that that is the real cost of doing their business. And we know that underfunded infrastructure creates a hidden risk. If we have an underfunded infrastructure that fuels your mission, then definitely you have weak control. You are probably going to have staff turnover. You are going to have delayed reporting, and definitely reputational exposure. And funders today, as we know, they are not just funding passion, they are actually funding confidence, which is brought about by a properly built machinery. The fourth shift that these organizations do is that they structure governance financially. This one usually surprises people because it's subtle. Financial sustainability is also about your board structure. And in my earlier video, I did talk about why sometimes your board could be your biggest risk. So if you find it interesting, you can go and listen to that. So what I'm saying is that the board doesn't just have fundraising expectations, but financial literacy at the governance level is key. So what sustainable nonprofits ensure they do is that their board understands the cash flow, but not just the surplus and the deficit. Their finance committee reviews their risk exposure intentionally. And then their reserve policies are written and enforced. They're not just written and kept as something that maybe a funder needed, but they're actually written and they are enforced. And then they also have scenario planning that is conducted annually. So if you are, once I was asked that if your largest funder exists next quarter, what happens? Yeah, you would probably go silent for a while, but that silence is the structural vulnerability that I'm talking about. Sustainable nonprofits, they don't avoid that question because it's most of the time it's there, but they model around it. They they stress test it in a way that they can plan for it. And then the final five shift that these organizations do that they avoid the fragility trap. So now this is what I had promised you earlier. One mistake that I would mention about the organizations that don't find themselves sustainable, they don't avoid this trap. But organizations that are sustainable intentionally avoid the fragility trap. The fragility trap, sorry. So what does this fragility trap entail? So this is a scenario where revenue concentration is disguised as success. How does it happen? One large donor, one dominant grant, one government contract. Everything looks stable until it's not. So I have been in the room when one major funding stream evaporated, and organizations that survived were not the ones with biggest budgets. And we can again refer to the USAID funding freeze. The organizations that have survived were the ones with flexible cost structures, diversified income streams, and most importantly, scalable operations. They structured fixed and their variable costs intentionally. They also avoided locking 90% of their expenses into rigid long-term commitments. They built adaptability in their financial DNA because sustainability is not rigidity, it is strategic flexibility. So over the years, I have refined what I call the organization financial credibility method. At its core, sustainable nonprofits structure their finances around three pillars. One is the structural clarity, clear cost allocation, clean reporting, transparent financial storytelling. Two is the liquidity strength, forecasting discipline, reserve strategy, cash management. And the number three is the governance alignment, financial literate boards, risk monitoring, and then policy enforcement. When these three things align, something powerful usually happens. Funders don't just approve proposals, they trust the institution. And you know, when one or two of your funders trust your institution, trust compounds, and the organization benefits from the snowballing effect of a donor round table. So let me leave you with this as I come to the end of this conversation. Strong missions attract attention. Strong financial infrastructure attracts longevity. So if your organization is constantly on survival mode, the issue may not be the fundraising scale. It may be the architecture. So here is one question that probably you can ask yourself. Is your organization built for applause or it's built for endurance? If this resonated with you, you can like or even you can comment with structure below and tell me which area you need to strengthen most in your organization. Is it governance? Is it liquidity? Or is it cost allocation? And for those that are serious about building a funder-ready, financial credible organization. You can subscribe so that we continue expounding on this matter. But until then, build credibility, design resilience, and structure for sustainability. Thank you for watching, and let's connect in the next video.